In all my 372 cycles as the chief scholar of theoretical understanding at the Galactic Council of Wisdom, I, Professor Kax'thor, never imagined I would be writing this account. But here I am, documenting perhaps the most humbling moment in our civilization's history. My tentacles still quiver when I recall the day our most fundamental assumptions about intelligence were shattered by a species we had barely deemed worthy of notice. Let me start at the beginning, before my prestigious title became somewhat of a cosmic joke. The Council of Wisdom stood as the pinnacle of intellectual achievement in our known universe. Our crystalline towers on Centauri Prime housed the greatest minds from over 10,000 advanced civilizations. Species that had mastered quantum mechanics before developing written language worked alongside beings of pure energy who solved complex mathematical theorems for entertainment. At the heart of our grand institution lay the Enigma, as we had come to call it. A riddle of sorts, though that word hardly does justice to its complexity. The Enigma was discovered in the ruins of the Predecessor civilization, etched into a perfect cube of unknown material that defied all attempts at analysis. The cube itself was unremarkable in size, barely larger than a standard data crystal, but the mathematical sequences carved into its surface had consumed the intellectual resources of countless civilizations for over 50,000 years. The Predecessor civilization had vanished mysteriously at the height of their technological advancement, leaving behind remnants of their incredible achievements scattered across the galaxy. But the Enigma was different. Unlike their other artifacts, which we had successfully reverse-engineered, this one seemed designed specifically to taunt us with its apparent simplicity. I witnessed the mental collapse of the great Professor Kax'thor, whose 17 brains worked in perfect quantum synchronization, after she spent 2 decades attempting to decipher it. The hive mind of Betelgeuse dedicated 3 generations of their collective consciousness to its solution, only to retreat into a century of contemplative silence after their failure. Even the silicon sages of Tau Ceti, with their processing power capable of modeling entire galaxy clusters, could not crack its code. My own contribution to this grand parade of failure was particularly noteworthy. I developed what came to be known as the Kax'thor probability matrix, a theoretical framework that proved, with what we thought was mathematical certainty, that the Enigma required a level of cognitive evolution at least 7 stages beyond anything currently existing in our galaxy. My paper on the subject won me my position on the Council and was considered the definitive work on why the Enigma would remain unsolved until our species had evolved far beyond their current forms. We had categorized every approach, documented every failure, and created entire branches of mathematics trying to understand why we kept failing. The Enigma became more than a puzzle, it was the yardstick against which we measured our species' cognitive development. Solving it was seen as the ultimate marker of evolutionary intelligence. That is, until we met the humans. When our long-range sensors first detected primitive radio signals from their unremarkable solar system, we categorized Earth, as we had countless other emerging civilizations, primitive, pre-spaceflight, barely worth an entry in our vast databases. Their designation was so low that we assigned only a single observation pod to their entire system. The bare minimum required by Council protocols. The decision to place a single observation pod near Earth was made with such little deliberation that I had to search through 16 layers of archived data just to find the meeting minutes. Observer Third Class Vextora, a junior researcher who had barely completed her metamorphosis cycle, was assigned to monitor the entire solar system. The posting was considered so unremarkable that it was commonly used as a quiet place to complete mandatory field research requirements. Their assessment metrics barely registered on our scales: no unified planetary government, heavy reliance on fossil fuels, countless regional conflicts, and most telling of all, no standardized system for measuring intelligence. They hadn't even achieved rudimentary genetic self-modification. The most advanced human computers barely matched the processing power of our waste recycling units. When Vextora filed her first quarterly report, it was automatically archived without review, as was standard for primitive worlds. Her second report received the same treatment. It wasn't until her third report that our automated systems flagged an anomaly in her behavioral patterns. She had begun dedicating extra observation time to human educational facilities, particularly something they called elementary schools. This deviation from standard protocols triggered an automatic review by my department. I remember being mildly annoyed at having to waste my valuable time on such a mundane matter. The footage Kax'thor had recorded showed nothing special, just young humans engaging in their primitive learning rituals. Games with colored blocks, simple mathematical exercises, crude attempts at artistic expression. But there was something in Kax'thor's notes that caught my attention. She had noted that human children approached problems differently than their adults. While their grown specimens followed rigid, predictable patterns of thought, their young ones displayed what she called beautiful chaos in their problem-solving methods. At first, I dismissed her observations as the romantic musings of an inexperienced researcher. Many junior observers go through a phase where they become emotionally attached to their study subjects. We were about to reassign her when she broke nearly every protocol in the observation handbook. Kax'thor initiated direct contact with a human child. The reprimand notice was already being drafted when her emergency transmission reached the council chambers. Her message consisted of just 3 words, but they were enough to make all 4 of my hearts stop beating momentarily. She solved it. The human child called herself Lily Armstrong, though she was quick to inform Kax'thor that her full name was Lily Rose Armstrong, age 11 3/4. She had skin the color of her planet's soil after rain, hair that curled like spiral galaxies, and eyes that seemed to see straight through conventional reality. When the council reviewed the footage of their first encounter, we were struck by how utterly wrong everything had gone, yet how impossibly right the outcome was. Kax'thor had been observing a human learning center in a region they called Seattle when her cloaking device malfunctioned. The failure lasted only 2.3 seconds, but it was enough. Most humans remained oblivious, their brains automatically filtering out what they could not comprehend. But not Lily. She noticed. According to the footage, she simply walked up to the spot where Kax'thor had momentarily appeared and said, "Your quantum displacement field is unstable. Have you tried reversing the polarity?" None of those words should have made sense coming from a being at her technological level. When Kax'thor, in her shock, actually materialized, Lily just smiled and said, "That's better. Want to see my science project?" The security breach alone should have triggered an immediate planetary quarantine. Instead, Kax'thor found herself following this small human to a table covered in what appeared to be random object string, mirrors, colored paper, and something called pipe cleaners. Lily was building what she called a model of perception. She explained it while rearranging the materials. "Most people think in straight lines," she said, "connecting 2 points with a piece of string. But that's boring. Everything is connected to everything else, all at once." She demonstrated by creating an intricate web of string and pipe cleaners that, to our astonishment, bore a striking resemblance to a quantum probability matrix. What truly caught our attention was her explanation of why adults found it hard to understand her project. "They try to make everything make sense," she said. "But sometimes sense doesn't make sense, you know." At this point, she had created a pattern with mirrors that seemed to reflect infinitely into itself. Sometimes you have to look at things backward and upside down and sideways all at once. Kax'thor, breaking yet another protocol, showed Lily a holographic projection of the Enigma. Standard procedure called for immediate memory wipes of any humans exposed to advanced technology. Instead, my junior researcher asked, "What do you see?" Lily looked at it for exactly 6.2 seconds before laughing. "Oh," she said, "it's a joke." When Kax'thor asked her to explain, Lily rearranged her pipe cleaners into a crude but recognizable replica of the cube's pattern. "You're all thinking too hard," she said. "It's like when my dad tries to put together my toys without reading the instructions. He makes it super complicated, but it's really simple if you just look at the picture on the box." The council chamber erupted in chaos when we received this transmission. Half the members demanded Kax'thor's immediate recall and psychiatric evaluation. The other half insisted she continue her observations. Meanwhile, Lily Armstrong, unaware of the galactic uproar she had caused, was explaining to our thoroughly confused researcher why clouds looked like animals if you tilted your head just right. The council's emergency session lasted 3 full rotations. I presented the classified specifications of the Enigma to an audience that included 17 Grand Masters of Logic and the entire Quantum Intelligence Division. The cube's surface displayed what we had long believed to be a complex mathematical sequence, 9 rows of 9 symbols, repeated on all 6 faces, yet each face showed subtle variations that seemed to follow no recognizable pattern. The hive mind of Betelgeuse had concluded it was a representation of multidimensional space-time coordinates. The silicon sages of Tau Ceti interpreted it as a quantum encryption key. The crystalline consciousness of Vega swore it was a blueprint for consciousness transfer. Professor Kax'thor's 17 brains had simultaneously reached 17 different conclusions, all mathematically sound, yet all demonstrably incorrect. We had developed entire fields of study around the Enigma's possible solutions. The Kax'thor probability matrix itself was based on analyzing the geometric progressions between symbol sets. We had mapped every possible mathematical relationship, every quantum state, every logical progression. The most advanced artificial intelligences in the galaxy had spent millennia running calculations. And now, a human child was saying it was a joke. When we asked Lily to explain her reasoning, she shrugged, a curiously expressive human gesture. "You're all looking at it like it's super serious," she said. "But look," she pointed at the cube's surface. "It's making funny faces." The silence in the council chamber was absolute. Funny faces? 10,000 years of advanced mathematical analysis. And she was talking about funny faces? Lily grabbed her datapad, a primitive device that could barely handle basic arithmetic, and started drawing. "See, if you turn it this way," she rotated the hologram of the cube, "these symbols look like eyes. And these ones here are like a smile, but all twisty. And on this side, it's sticking out its tongue." The Grand Masters of Logic began calculations to disprove her immediately. The Quantum Intelligence Division initiated a full-spectrum analysis of facial pattern recognition algorithms. I felt my professional reputation crumbling before my eyes. But Lily wasn't finished. She held up her datapad, showing a crude drawing she'd made. "It's like those puzzles in my magazine," she explained. "The ones where you have to spot the differences between two pictures. Every side is almost the same, but they changed little bits to make different expressions. It's like one of those flip books my friend Tommy makes, where each page is a little different, so it looks like the picture is moving." The crystalline consciousness of Vega shattered into exactly 1,843 pieces upon hearing this. "We're still reassembling them." Vex Tora, who had been permitted to attend the session holographically, asked the question we were all afraid to voice: "Are you saying the Enigma, the greatest mystery in known space, is just a collection of faces making silly expressions?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "But that's not the best part. Look what happens when you make all the faces at once." She proceeded to demonstrate using her own facial features, contorting them in ways that made several council members deeply uncomfortable. The council's processors hummed as they began mapping her facial movements against the cube's patterns. The Quantum Intelligence Division's matrices started smoking from the calculations. And slowly, impossibly, a pattern emerged. Not in the complex mathematical formulas we'd spent millennia developing, but in the simple, three-dimensional representation of movement through space. The next 2 hours redefined everything we thought we knew about intelligence. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor of the council chamber, surrounded by the most sophisticated holographic interfaces ever created, yet she preferred to work with her colored pencils and paper. The Grand Masters of Logic watched in horror as she casually violated 73 fundamental laws of mathematical progression. She hummed while she worked, a tune she called the Itsy Bitsy Spider, which several council members tried to analyze for hidden quantum harmonics before realizing it was just a simple children's song. What truly sent waves of panic through the assembled scholars was her complete disregard for established problem-solving methodologies. When asked about her solution strategy, she replied, "I'm just doodling until it looks right." The hive mind of Betelgeuse had to take a brief recess to prevent a collective aneurysm. Professor Kax'thor's 17 brains began arguing with each other as Lily rearranged the holographic symbols like she was decorating a cake. "That one goes there because it looks lonely," she explained, pointing to a symbol we had classified as a fourth-dimensional quantum operator. "And these two need to be together because they're best friends." The silicon sages of Tau Ceti attempted to create an algorithm to follow her logic. Their processors shut down in protest. Best friends? The symbols were best friends? Centuries of quantum mathematics reduced to playground social dynamics? Yet as she worked, patterns began emerging that none of us had seen before. The faces she had identified started to align in ways that created new expressions, new meanings. The cube's surfaces, when mapped according to her seemingly random arrangements, began showing harmonics we had never detected. Vex Tora, The only one among us who had spent significant time observing humans started translating Lily's statements into scientific terms. When Lily said two symbols were best friends, she was intuitively identifying quantum entanglement patterns. When she said something looked lonely, she was spotting singular point anomalies that our instruments had somehow missed for millennia. The tension in the chamber grew unbearable as Lily's solution took shape. The crystalline consciousness, still missing a few shards, began to resonate at frequencies that threatened to shatter every transparent surface in the room. The quantum intelligence division's predictive models were showing probability curves that should have been impossible. "What do you see when you look at it now?" I asked her, my tentacles trembling with anticipation. Lily looked up from her work, graphite smudged on her nose, and said, "It's like when you tell a story, but you tell it backward and forward and sideways all at once. Each face is telling part of the story, but you have to watch all of them together to get the joke." The implications of what she was suggesting caused spontaneous molting in several council members. The Enigma wasn't a mathematical formula or a quantum key, or even a simple sequence. It was something far more profound, something that had eluded us precisely because we were too evolved, too logical, too convinced of our own intellectual superiority to see watch this. Lily announced, jumping to her feet. She arranged her drawings in a circle around the holographic cube. "It's like a flip book, but in every direction at once." She began spinning the cube, aligning each face with her drawings. The symbols danced across the surfaces, shifting and changing with each rotation. The council chamber erupted in chaos. The silicon sages sparked violently. The hive mind of Betelgeuse went completely silent. Professor Kax'thor's 17 brains synchronized for the first time in decades, all screaming the same word: impossible. But there it was. As Lily manipulated the cube, the symbols flowed like water, creating an animated sequence that played out across all 6 faces simultaneously. The predecessors hadn't left us a mathematical formula or a quantum encryption key. They'd left us a cartoon. A cartoon that told the story of a young predecessor trying to explain a complex idea to a group of serious-looking scholars. With each rotation, the scholars became more confused, while the young one grew more frustrated. The final sequence showed the young one laughing as the scholars tied themselves in logical knots. It was a joke, all right. A 50,000-year-old joke about the dangers of overthinking. I watched the color drain from several council members who suddenly realized they had spent their entire careers writing scholarly papers about what essentially amounted to an ancient comic strip. The quantum intelligence division quietly began deleting several million terabytes of analysis data. Lily beamed at us, clearly proud of her solution, but not quite understanding its galactic significance. "Can I show this to my little brother?" she asked. "He loves funny faces." Vextora looked at me pleadingly. I found myself facing a decision that would affect the course of galactic civilization. Here was a child who had casually unlocked a secret that had driven some of our greatest minds to madness. A child who solved it not through advanced mathematics or quantum theory, but by recognizing that sometimes a face is just a face. My first heart suggested maintaining the galaxy's dignity by classifying everything and pretending this never happened. My second heart argued for a complete restructuring of our entire approach to problem solving. My third heart was too busy having an existential crisis to offer an opinion. My fourth heart, however, had an idea. I turned to the council and said, perhaps before we decide how to proceed, we should ask ourselves one question: what would the predecessors think is funnier? Keeping this secret and preserving our dignity, or admitting that a human child solved their greatest puzzle by treating it as a cosmic game of peekaboo? The council chamber was silent for precisely 3.7 seconds before the first laugh broke out. It started with Vextora, spread to the younger council members, and eventually even reached the grandmasters of logic. Soon the entire chamber was filled with various species interpretations of laughter, from quantum harmonic resonances to gravitational wave pulses. The revelation of the Enigma's true nature sparked the greatest reformation in galactic history. The Council of Wisdom underwent what humans would call an identity crisis. Our entire system of measuring intelligence needed to be reconsidered. We had based it all on logical progression and computational complexity, never once considering that true wisdom might include knowing when to abandon logic entirely. Humanity's classification was immediately upgraded from primitive to fascinatingly unpredictable. We established new research protocols specifically focused on human children's problem-solving methods. The term pulling a Lily became standard terminology for approaching a problem from an intentionally illogical angle. The Quantum Intelligence Division created a new department dedicated to studying human playfulness as a cognitive tool. The Silicon Sages of Tau Ceti began incorporating random play breaks into their processing cycles. Even the hive mind of Betelgeuse started encouraging its drones to occasionally ignore optimization protocols and just wing it. Lily Armstrong returned to her regular life, though Vextora maintained contact under the guise of a pen pal project. The last I heard, Lily had started a school club dedicated to solving impossible puzzles through what she called creative silliness. She's already attracted the attention of 3 different galactic research institutes. As for me, I keep the cube on my desk now. Sometimes, when facing a particularly challenging problem, I turn it around and watch the faces change. It reminds me that the predecessors, at the height of their technological advancement, chose to leave behind not a weapon, not a mathematical proof, not a philosophical treatise, but a joke. A joke that took 50,000 years to land, delivered perfectly by an 11-year-old human who still counted her age in fractions. The Council has since discovered similar patterns in other predecessor artifacts, things we had dismissed as damaged or incomplete because they didn't fit our logical frameworks. We're finding their sense of humor everywhere now that we know to look for it. They left behind jokes in their architecture, their art, even their waste disposal systems. The entire galaxy is filled with their laughter, and we were too busy being clever to hear it. The humans have a saying that often the simplest solution is the correct one. We had a similar saying, but ours took 6 hours to convey properly and required advanced calculus. Perhaps that's been our problem all along. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the Council's newest committee, the Department of Not Taking Ourselves Too Seriously. We're currently debating whether to change the Council's official name to the Galactic Association of People Who Sometimes Think Too Hard About Things That Are Actually Quite Simple. Lily suggested it. We're seriously considering it.